Perfect. Awesome. And we are live, Miss Sarah Lhrar, our Astro Auntie, and my name is Sara Elise, and we are astrologers, the two of us. And we are coming together for our inaugural conversation, which we are calling Hot Chats. And we're going to talk about, we might change the name. I'm not married to the name. And we're going to talk about something astrological today. We've been wanting to do this for a really long time, and we've been wanting to get together and meld minds and meld hearts and meld souls and just
Because
have
that's what we do. Because when we get
we
together, we meld minds and meld souls and have very deep conversations about astrology. And then we're like, shit, we should record this and this needs to be shared. So this is the moment when we decided to press record on a very interesting conversation that was already being had.
It's already being had, exactly. And so what is the topic of conversation today that we wanted to share? It is about the nodal axis, okay? As you guys all know, every year we have 2 eclipse gates. They'll happen 2 times a year. And eclipses only happen when the nodes of the moon are within a certain degree point. I think it's 14, maybe it's 11. I can't remember the exact degrees that the nodes have to be away from the new or the full moon. There's a certain degree point. The closer the nodes are to the actual fuller new moon, that's like, then we get like a total eclipse. If the nodes are a little farther away, we'll get a penumbral eclipse, right? So it's a partial eclipse. And there's and so as close as it is, as tight up as it is, that's like a perfect alignment. And so we get the eclipses twice a year because the nodes of the moon are always changing. They change every 18 months. They go sign by sign by sign by sign, and they sort of go through the zodiacal wheel
backwards.
And they go backwards. That's right. And the nodes of what are the nodes of the moon? Well, essentially the nodes of the moon, like the Earth has an ecliptic line around which the moon revolves, right? And then the sun, relative to the sun, the Earth has an ecliptic line around which it revolves around the sun. And there's this place of intersection where the moon's ecliptic line and then the Earth's ecliptic line around the sun come together. And there's 2 points of intersection where these 2 ecliptic lines meet. And those are the nodes of the moon. There's a south node and there's a north node.
And I think it's important to say that that's a calculation. It's a point. There is no physical object called the north node. You cannot take a telescope and look out for the north node like you would an asteroid or a planet. It's a calculation of where the alignment between Earth, the sun, and the moon happens. And so that's why we get the eclipses in the same sign as the sign of the nodes.
That's right, so exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So right now we just came out of an eclipse gate. We had a lunar eclipse. First it was a solar eclipse. And the solar eclipse was, well, it was an Aries new moon, but it was like 25, like it was 29.5 degrees Aries, right? So it was really, really, really close to Taurus. So the nodes of the moon were sitting at like what they were like around, oh gosh, they're almost at the
5. Yeah, they were around 5 degrees Taurus at that moment.
4 or 5 degrees. I think they're at 4 degrees now, but they were really close to the beginning of Taurus. So we had this. So it was an exact eclipse, like, right, it was a total eclipse. And because the new moon was happening almost near Taurus and the nodes were in Taurus Scorpio, there was that exact alignment. And then 2 weeks later, we had a lunar eclipse, which was a penumbral eclipse. So it was partial. And that one happened at the full moon of Scorpio. So this exact eclipse.
So for the last 18 months, every new moon in Taurus, and every new moon in Scorpio, and every full moon in Scorpio and full moon in Taurus was an eclipse.
Yes,
exactly. So there hasn't been a chill Taurus season since 2021.
Yes, that's right. Right. At the very end of 2021, the nodes shifted. Okay. So all these words like they start to confuse me. But I think what we're really trying to say here is that the nodes of the moon change every 18 months. Within that 18-month window, the eclipses are going to happen inside the season that is relative to whatever axis the nodes are on, right? So the nodes are going to be on an axis, meaning one in south and one in north, opposite signs, creating a polarity or a tension or an outer limit. I like to think about them as kind of like a boundary, because so think about this for a second. So the moon, and this is what Dane Rudyard talks about when he talks about the eclipses and when he talks about the nodes of the moon, that the moon is the subjective experience of what we are on this planet, right? So we are all gods in a body at some level. We're not really human beings at all, but we incarnate here and we take a form, right? We take a body, we take a human meat suit or whatever you want to call it. And we come into this beautiful package and we come into this human experience. And I think I'm separate and you think you're separate, but we're really not. But in order to have a human experience, we need to understand ourselves. We need to understand ourselves like relative to a separate identity. And that's the moon. The moon is our separate identity, right? It's like the part of us that's our inner self. It's our egoic self, right?
The moon would be also the most vulnerable part of you, the most baby part of you, the most reactive part of you, the most vulnerable side of you, the most naked side of you. I tell people that people know your moon sign. The people who are familiar with your moon sign are people who saw you in your underwear. So your mom, your siblings, your best friends, your partners, who saw you at 3 a.m. without your makeup on.
Yeah.
Those people are the people who know your moon sign. Your moon sign is not revealed, it's private.
Yeah.
And it's kept protected by other parts of you, maybe by other signs of you, and certainly by your sun sign.
Yes, yes, yes. He holds sentinel, the sentinel sun.
Right, guards your moon sign.
Absolutely, 100%, totally.
And make sure that nobody can see it. So there's a part of the moon that can be also shadow. What do you wish to not share with people?
Yeah.
What is only safe with your unconditional ones?
Yeah, that's so true. So, and within that lunar structure as well, we go through a lot of growth and self-development. Like we're always changing, right? The moon goes from new to full to new to full. It's always changing. Every day the face is different. And so same internally, our sense of self and our egoic understanding of ourself as a separate thing is always changing. It's always in some kind of fluctuated kind of evolutionary state. So, and if you like zoom out, then if every one of us has a little moon sign inside, evolving, right? Always changing, evolving, growing, sharing itself, growing through relationships, through its own identity with itself. And then you look at the collective of us, like the whole of humanity, we're all one big family, right? We all have an evolutionary kind of turning that we go through collectively as well. But we experience that evolution as an individual unit within the whole. And we experience evolution through our lunar cycle, through the moon, through the internal subjective awareness of ourselves. But if we were to go out into our higher self and look down at the planet and see ourselves from outside, we would see that we're all evolving together, that we're all a big family, we're a collective, we're all together, right? It's just that we believe we're separate because we have to. Because why else would we come here except to experience what it's like to be me? And you experience what it's like to be you. And so I get the hero's journey of me and you get the hero's journey of you. And yet, relative to our own personal subjective reality, if we could take the veil off, we would understand that we're all learning lessons as a group. And those lessons are defined every 18 months by the nodes of the moon.
I think what's interesting that you're saying that it's calling for me is that the idea of the moon and safety, and how it's not safe to be a collective and it's not safe to trust the universe, right? Wow. So we have this relationship with universe where it's like this where we have to trust it because there's no other choice, but it's really fucking scary to trust it because, you know, I'll trust you with me, but not with my kids type of thing, right? I'll still need control over some things. And so the moon separates also because of fear sometimes and because of lack of trust. And so at the ultimate, like, collective level would be like this real surrender that I am not just for me and that I am safe being a part of the collective. But the human history and our human collective trauma has shown us that fuck, it's really not safe, the collective.
Right, right. It has and it hasn't.
Right, but it's this tension where it's all we want, it's all we desire, it's all we aspire to.
We're afraid.
And then there's fear, and there's real fear for reasons.
Totally, I agree. And I think that that's probably part of like a very healthy self-protective mechanism that each one of us is responsible for ourselves, and that's okay. You need to keep yourself safe, and you do that through your moon. I need to be safe, but I can also have my higher self come online and be in a transpersonal state of consciousness, and I can still be my own individuated self as well. Like these two parts of us can come together.
You know why, Sarah? Because it also brings us to the next talk that you will have for Isar. And that, I mean, this is where you're at in your thought process as an astrologer also, is seeing the personal in relationship to the transpersonal.
Yeah, that's my gift.
And seeing our vertical axis, all of us. And I think that it's fascinating for me to observe how every astrology thought that you have right now is being brought to that axis of like the personal, transpersonal.
Yeah, well, I think we're going through a mass awakening on our planet, and I think we're all waking up to some extent to our transpersonal nature. So I find myself very naturally gravitating toward that kind of a conversation or an understanding of things. I see it that way. But I also see that within everybody's perspective is the same thing. I just use specific language to describe it my way, because that's my lens. And yet it is all present, omnipresent all the time, right? So you in a lunar environment, if someone is just associating with their moon and their personal identity, and they feel scared and they don't know what to do and they want to trust, just in the act of opening up or going a little bit outside of the bounds of their own identity, trusting another, trusting a neighbor, trusting a dog, trusting themselves, there is growth in that. There is illumination, or there's elevation, right? So they might not think about it the same way I put words to it, but it's still happening. But in any case,
because you're putting words to it is what's interesting for me.
Yeah.
That people might be having the inclination or the process, but maybe not putting words or, you know.
That's true. I like to put words to it.
Okay, back to
so anyway, back to the nodal axis. Okay, so the reason why we wanted to talk about this, again, we're just describing what it is, and I think we've already been recording for like a million years, but okay, so let's get on to what the nodal axis is. Why is it important? Why does the nodal axis really actually, like, I really feel personally that when we understand what the nodes of the moon are at any one time, we can create a conversation with our own collective evolution, and we can explore that conversation at the personal level and at the cultural level and at the global level, depending on where you're interested, right? I like the personal level because that's my own, I like psychological, personal, so like psychospiritual, that's me. But we were getting into an interesting conversation before we started recording about the cultural level of the moon and the nodes. And what we were talking about was the fact that through COVID, the nodes of the moon, well, first of all, when we all got brought home, right, in April of 2020, the North Node was in Cancer. We were all being brought home into our
government.
by the government, by the forces that were, and we all had to come home and face our own emotional body. Now, very quickly though, the nodes of the moon shifted to South Node of Sag and North Node of Gemini, and I can't exactly remember when this was. It might have been in the summer of 2020 or in the fall. I can't
In the
recall.
fall. It was in the fall.
It was October or something. Yeah. And there was a very significant shift in the zeitgeist at that time. And the vitriol and the conversations that started to kind of flame up, right? There was the George Floyd thing everywhere. There was the vaccine thing everywhere. There was all this conversation that started to happen and all of these opinions, because what we were looking at was a south node of Sagittarius to a north node of Gemini. And as you were pointing out before, Sagittarius is about self-righteousness. I know what's right. I know what's true. I know the truth. I'm going to tell you the truth bluntly and without any respect for your opinion. In fact, if you give me your opinion, I'm going to tell you to shut up, or in probably much ruder terms. So there was a lot of mudslinging that was happening during that time, and a lot of like, it was very painful, right? It's like yelling and screaming and justification.
What I find interesting in that regards also is that the early signs, from Aries to Virgo, and then the later signs from Libra to Pisces. On the evolutionary wheel, you would have, for instance, the thought process of Gemini being seen as immature, or quantity versus the quality of the deeper thought of Gemini. But right now, with the North Node being in the early signs, and the South Node being in the latter signs, it's stretching our understanding of these signs. So I feel like as a collective, we have a tendency naturally to prime Sagittarian mind over Gemini mind. And be like, oh, Gemini, that's a lot of words, that's bullshit, not knowing what's true, two-faced, hypocrite, blah, blah. And then Sagittarius, oh my God, yes, the pursuit
truth, of wisdom. They know, they don't have to think about it. They are it. The indigeneity of them is beautiful.
Exactly. And it's like the gossip of Gemini versus the academia of Sagittarius. And so culturally, we prime the latter signs versus the earlier signs. But right now, with the North Node and the younger sign, it's really shifting our attention and being like, wait, hold up. The Sagittarius mind that thinks they know, that is ready to die on the hill of the soapbox, like, I know what's true, let me tell you. Let me tell you the truth about this. And Gemini being like, well, actually, did you think
about the facts?
Let's look at the facts. Let's look at the facts, and let's look at multiple truths. Let's look at paradox.
Yes, paradox. Yes, we can both be right here to varying degrees.
Exactly, can sit together in peace, and how that is actually much more complex than having the one truth, right?
Exactly.
And so that is a stretch collectively to get out of specialty, to get out of deep into broad. So this is also something that I think about Sagittarius versus Gemini, is that Sagittarius would be deep knowledge, and Gemini is breadth of knowledge, broad, right?
Dispersal.
And dispersal, right? And how sometimes knowing a little bit about a lot of things is actually richer than knowing so much about the one thing. And so for me, that was really interesting to notice in myself, like, oh, making peace with the Gemini mind. Are you making peace with that? With what you thought was gossip, maybe, or shallow knowledge before, and now seeing the value of nuance, complexity, understanding.
I really learned how to listen during that nodal cycle, right? I really learned how to listen to other people's opinions without judgment or without projection. And it was incredibly powerful for me. I had this beautiful client at one point during that time who was very Trumpy, and like, she was a real Trumpster. And I loved this woman. And we were doing a lot of deep work together. And I remember, like, at one point, like, we were going to start having political conversations. And I'm not even American. Like, what do I care? I don't have a lot of opinions about the American political, but I realized how judgmental I was about her political perspective. And so I was sitting with her and we started talking about it. And I remember realizing that I had a choice in that moment, that I could either project my own expectations, beliefs, and judgments onto the situation, or I could stop, go into a neutral place of receptivity, and try to seek information so that I could understand where she was coming from. And so of course I chose the second option, not only because I was being paid to be in service to this woman, but really just because at a deeper level, I felt that was a more evolutionarily appropriate choice to make.
And also you're a Gemini.
Well, I'm a double gem. Yeah.
And also you are, I mean, you kind of like are able to sit with contradiction naturally. Whereas for me, a double Taurus.
It is true. Maybe it's a little harder for you. But what it did for me, what it taught me was that underneath the surface of everybody's opinion, there is a kernel, there is a truth deep inside, and there's a flame, there's a warmth, there's something that is fueling the underlying reality that we choose to identify with. And if you can get to that core place, we're all very much the same. That all the other stuff is just icing on the cake or wrapping with a bow around it. It all is pretty paper. But at the core truth, she is the same as me and I'm the same as her, and we want exactly the same things for our families, for ourselves, right? And it was a fascinating moment of like just letting it go. And I feel that was an invitation during that time for me anyway. But then we changed, right? It was the winter solstice of 2021. I believe it was the exact winter solstice actually. And the nodes of the moon shifted, although it's a little bit complicated because there's the true node and the mean node, and they all change at different times.
Right. I think we had our first eclipse in Scorpio right then during Scorpio season. It was the first Scorpio eclipse. It was a Taurus full moon.
2021?
November. The Taurus full moon of November was an eclipse.
I don't know. I'd have to look back. I don't. I just remember
there's these years where it's like when it's shifting, that there's going to be the one that's out of sync, and that's bringing the thing. Yeah.
Okay. So I mean, I believe, I don't know what this ephemeris, I don't know whether this is mean or true, but according to this ephemeris, it was actually December 24th when the nodes shifted.
Just like now when it's shifting in July, so the shift of the signs is one thing, but the eclipses and that sign.
Yeah, the eclipses are different. Yeah, the eclipses happen. Yeah, exactly. There's a bit of a transition state. You're right. Where the signs, like the sun and moon, are just slightly out of sync with the nodal axis, and there's like, it's almost like a migratory transition point, exactly. Right? So in December of 2021, the nodes shifted away from the Sag Gemini and they moved to Scorpio Taurus. Okay, so I remember sitting at that point and thinking, oh shit, I do not want to walk through 2022. I'm really scared. Because because the South Node of Scorpio, I was worried, right? I was like, this is going to bring up a lot of really dark emotion. And I wasn't quite sure what that meant at the time. Like sitting at the end of 2021 and looking forward, I was like, oh, this is going to be scary. This is going to be painful. We're going to have to face our deepest fears. We're going to have to feel a lot of emotion. And we're probably going to have to wrestle with our demons to some extent, knowing what Scorpio is, right? And Scorpio is about power, but it's a little bit more subtle than that, because I feel like Scorpio is about the power imbalance between what is really going on in Scorpio, right? Because at an esoteric level, Scorpio is that place where the personality, the ego, the me, the little me, the me meets the soul, which is the big me. And you were speaking to this so beautifully earlier, that lunar self that's afraid of trusting God, or afraid of trusting the universe, afraid of letting go of control, has a very strong attachment to itself, right? And it's going to fight to keep its sovereignty there. It's going to be like, no, I'm in control here, man. You can't take my identity away from me. Except there's this bigger part. There's always there's something else. There's always something more. And that's that Scorpio complex, is between the part that doesn't want to let go of itself and the part that's waiting, just waiting to be released into, so that we can die and be reborn into something more. And so it's always, always, always chaos inside that. There's a chaotic element to Scorpio always, where it's just not settled. It's not settled. And the opposite, the Taurus in the north, the remedy for that south node is the settled. It's the safety. It's the calm. It's the neurological system just going, oh.
Which is really interesting, because while the North Node was in Taurus, Uranus has been in Taurus as well. So a lot of these eclipses have been Uranian at the same time. And so it's like Taurus, but with a caveat. Taurus, but it's a different flavor of Taurus. No, so almost, I think all the eclipses on that axis have been somewhat at some point triggered by Uranus. There was the one on November 8th, which was exact conjunct Uranus, which was really crazy. This one, the sun was opposite Uranus at the time of this full moon. The first one, I think, like it's always been Uranian. Yes, yeah. And Uranus. It's Taurus with a grain of this flavor of liberation.
Yeah.
This flavor of, first of all, making everything exponential. So Uranus takes the conversation like to another level automatically.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, how funny, you're thinking just about yourself when we're going to so much bigger. Like, it becomes a lot bigger. Yeah. But also the idea of safety becomes
well, it becomes more essential, because obviously, like, Uranus wants to depersonalize things. It wants to like fracture our personal identity, right? It wants to bring us into kind of a higher mind state where we're looking at things from a more universal perspective. So what is safety at an essential level? Like we haven't been able to hold on to a value system that was rooted in the past. Like, we have to break it. And
I love it. So what is safety if only you are safe? Is also a thing. So is it really safe if it's just you and your kids that are safe in your little house?
So you're looking at it from the like thinking about Uranus in terms of like the ruler of Aquarius, like bringing us into a collective orientation. So that
what is your
we're thinking about the global safety and all of us as being.
So, I think the conversation with the Americans and their guns is really fascinating from a Uranian standpoint. When a lot of Americans say, I need a gun so I can be safe, right? I need to be safe because there's going to be like some crazy with a gun who's going to come to shoot me. So I need a gun. But then everybody has guns. So all the crazies have guns. And then it's creating this gun culture. So it's like, what is safety? If you're thinking only about your own safety, you're creating an unsafe environment for all.
It's so beautiful. I love your perspective.
It's Uranus.
I never think about Uranus like that. I love that perspective. I always think about Uranus in terms of my higher mind and that quality of electromagnetic energy that just kind of brings me into a transpersonal state. So, but that is the collective state, right? Like when
hold up. Do you know what's right now?
Well, Uranus is at 18 degrees. It's at the same degree that it was when it hit the North Node.
Uranus Kazemi is right now, this moment. Uranus is conjunct the sun right now. And so before we hooked up, I was writing a love letter to Uranus and writing this whole story about Uranus because I am fundamentally Uranian.
Oh.
Fundamentally, it's like, okay, if I have like a religion, it's Uranus. Uranus is conjunct midheaven in my chart, right?
Oh, it is. And it's opposite your Mercury. It's trining my Mercury.
It's also my Mercury. And so I'm fundamentally Uranian. And so these are things that I think about, that I contemplate a lot about the relationship between when I am in my higher mind, then I stop taking care of myself, and then I become for all, right?
Right.
It's the only purpose of being in the higher mind, because if you're in your higher mind just to feed the excitement of the lower self, of the self, then what's the point?
That's so true. No, the
Right?
higher, well, yeah, 100%. Yeah,
It only has value when it becomes like you are being for all.
that's right. Yeah, it is a collective orientation. It's an
Right?
energetic orientation. It's not personal, it's transpersonal. Yeah.
Exactly. So it becomes generous,
Mm,
which for Taurus
mm.
is really difficult.
Oh,
Generosity is the high road of Taurus, period.
wow. Because Taurus
If
wants
you
to hold
see if
on.
a Taurus is healthy, you
Ah,
want to see how much they give. How
yeah.
much are they giving? Do they
Oh,
feel that there is enough to go
let
around?
go,
That's
that they
healthy
have
Taurus.
abundance. Yeah.
Healthy Taurus knows that nature is overflowing
Yeah. Yeah.
all
Yeah.
the time, that money is everywhere. That's healthy Taurus. Not healthy Taurus is going to be in the lack. And so for me, the eclipses in Taurus
Yeah.
and with Uranus is really that. Like, can we go from scarcity
Mm.
to abundance, from my own safety to understanding that sometimes it's safer to think about other people than it is to think about yourself. So if I invest for
And that there is way more abundance and way more value in that act of kind of collective, in that collective orientation, right? That we give what we are to others and we share the abundance. We create the abundance that we are.
100%.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
then taking care of communities, like what does that mean on a Uranian level, like political? Because Uranus is like, okay, sure, bitch, it's philosophical, but what's the political aspect of it? And so on a political aspect, that would be invest in communities,
Yeah.
make your schools better,
Well, I guess
make
this is
mental
why
health.
you have been like this year. I mean, because you play like your Uranus in Scorpio is on your midheaven on the ninth house side. So your Uranian.
That one eclipse was conjunct my Uranus. And at that moment, I got the phone call from the ESAR girl. She was like, you
Exactly, exactly. This is what's happened for you. You are creating community, you're reaching out, you're like, you're doing the Uranian thing, and you are linking and you're touching and you're growing and you're learning and you're expanding.
way that it had it, because before, and so part of my love letter to Uranus, so sorry, I'm going to make this about myself for a second. So Lhrar in Arabic means the liberator. And so my ancestor used to buy slaves to free them. And so that's how they got the name, the liberators, right? That was the
Oh
trait of
my
the
God,
family.
Lhrar is your last name, and that's where that comes from.
Liberator. And then the signature in my family is Uranus conjunction.
Oh my
So
God.
we all have them. We all have this Uranus really strong as a legacy. And the tagline of my website is astrology for personal and collective liberation because of Uranus.
Yeah.
So it's really very much about liberating. And then the link that I had before is that I used to be, working in fashion and fashion design, right? And my specialty was trend prediction, which is
Oh,
still my specialty in astrology. So Uranian.
yeah.
And that's the Uranus that I used to get before. It's just like knowing what's happening. I know what's happening. I feel it. I'm connected to the zeitgeist. I
Uh-huh.
know what's going on.
Uh-huh.
But now with the eclipses, like, wait, sure, this level of Uranus,
Uh-huh.
but then can you make it useful for all? And when does it become, you know, mana? When does that become like divine food for all?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is high road Taurus would be
Yes.
that,
Yeah.
you know? And so low road Taurus, Scorpio axis, my safety, I'm not safe. How can I be safe? Oh, how can I feel for me? It's like, wait, hold up. Can we get out of this conversation
Yeah.
and realize that every time you're being protective
Yeah.
of yourself, you're actually creating unsafe collective environment. Yes. Right.
I love you.
I love it. We're having
I
these
love it. I love you so much. Oh my God. Yeah. I love that perspective. Thank you.
right. So Taurus,
Yes, thank you so much.
for me, that's what came through at the end. I was like, ooh, get up. It's powered by Uranus.
Yeah.
We're getting out of this conversation.
And it's interesting right now that Uranus is at 18 degrees today, and that it was at 18 degrees last summer when it joined the North Node. Remember, there was a period of a couple weeks, 3 weeks, I think, maybe 2 weeks.
Yes.
It was June, July, and it was July, and Uranus came exact degree onto the North Node, and it was just this brief time. And I feel like that's when all these seeds were planted that you're talking about. There was this moment of kind of crystallization of that collective North Node. So if the nodes are giving us the shape of our evolutionary story, for the North Node to come conjunct Uranus in Taurus for that brief amount of time, right? To imbue or imbibe the destiny point of humanity or the collective lesson with the Uranian field for that amount of time. It's almost as though we've culminated now, because Uranus is at the exact same point that it was when that started. That pulse was begun last July, and today it is culminating. And at the Kazemi point, we are seeing it. It is illuminated in a love letter to Uranus and in a conversation between you and me where we can share this with other people if they're interested. And we can celebrate that, and we can say thanks to Uranus, and honor what that means to each one of us individually, right? And how that's come into our life.
Yes, I feel like it's really like we're edging closer to it, you know, slowly as a collective. We're getting closer to Uranus consciousness. It's been
We are, yeah, we are getting closer to it. It's coming. I think we have to go through a little bit of a dissolving of a lot of the prima materia, the dark shadow stuff that's still lingering. But it's coming. It's more and more and more all the time. I feel it every day, and I see it in my
and so we're
clients.
shifting now, and I don't know. So it's interesting. I was very interested about what you were saying about Aries and Libra, because
Yeah, so this is the next paradigm shift that's coming. Yeah. So let's go there. Let's go there. Let's talk about that, because that's really imminent. Like, we're closing off the Scorpio South, Taurus North cycle. And maybe, I mean, one of the things that I felt from the Taurus North node is I've really come into my body, right? Like, I've really anchored into my form more than I've ever done before, but I've brought my higher self into it. So I've been able to bring higher consciousness or higher self, higher mind into my literal being, so that I can embody it and sit inside the structure of that alignment in the moment and be safe as I am. I've never felt more comfortable sharing who I am, right? Or embodying myself as I do now, having come through this nodal shift.
perspective. I
So
love that perspective, because before you said it, I didn't realize that it did the same for me. That I was able to get completely back into physical practice, that I'm actually like dancing as a practice, so much so that I'm hosting a dance class every full moon, you know. Like somatic dance healing.
yeah.
I lost a ton of weight during this year and a half,
Wow.
actually, just
Amazing.
by being present in my body, not by trying.
Yeah.
So 100%, yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I've had, well, we were talking intimately earlier. I won't go into those details, but I've had Kundalini experiences this year. right? Of like literal, like of like the rising and the, you know, if you look at
The Scorpio.
Scorpio, Taurus, that axis is all about the Kundalini. I mean, it's all about that energy, which is our vital life force. It is what we are. It's not to be objectified or minimized. It's our power, right?
Because I posted on Facebook something like, oh, if you're feeling, dance it off. And you're like, can you actually fuck it up? Like,
I think I said, no, I made that comment. Exactly. But so it's changing though in July. So July is our ground zero for a shift in the evolutionary zeitgeist. So remember back at the beginning. So the nodal axis kind of gives us the lesson plan. Like it really helps us. It says, okay, as a collective, here is what the subjective evolutionary pulse is going to be. Let's go. And like all the planets have nodes. They all have nodes, right? But the moon's nodes are the most personal. We really learn through our lunar cycle. Like it's so personal. And I like being a person, Sarah. Don't you?
I know you do. And because part of you is so not Sarah.
So
I wouldn't even think about saying something like this. I'd be like, fuck, get me out of here. But you're like, bring me back in here.
I have to come back in here. I don't have a choice.
I love
But in any case, so the July nodes, we're going to start a new lesson plan. This is a new, this is we're starting Earth School, you know, Earth School Libra Aries. So the South node is going to be in Libra. The North node is going to be in Aries.
my God, it's my, you know what? I didn't just.
This is your nodal opposition because your North node is in Libra.
That's why I'm not ready. That's why I'm like, North Node in Aries? What the fuck is that? Because my North Node is in Libra.
Yes, it is. So I went through this one in with the Gemini Sag, because my South is Gemini and my North is Sag. So and I was on a call with oh God, what's this name? Holes to Heavens guy, Adam, brilliant astrologer, Adam Summer. And I remember I was in one of his parlors and it was like 2020 and I was like, Adam, what does this mean that I'm experiencing this nodal opposition? Because I was curious about what he would say. And he said, oh, well, I like to call that the Ouroboros. The snake eating its tail. And I was like, okay, thanks. I'll take that. I'll work with that. And from that he gave me, I then developed my own description of what it is to go through the nodal opposition. And what I've called it for myself is looking back to go forward. It's the looking back to go forward because it's the halfway point in your own nodal return cycle, right? So every 29 to 30 years, you're going to have a nodal return.
What's interesting is that it also comes as the closing of those major transits, which start with your Uranus opposition, and then you have the Saturn opposition, and finally you have the nodal opposition. And so it closes the chapter of midlife, kind of. And it's like baby no more in a way.
More. Let's say goodbye to all that bad stuff.
It's like baby no more. It's like, oh, are you entering crone? Are you perimenopausal? Is your hair breaking yet?
Do you have gray pubic hair yet?
Gray pubic hair. Not as
I didn't say that. Let's just delete. But yeah, yes, exactly. It's baby no more. It's let's get your shit together. It's let's look back at the things we've come from and take serious stock, because you get to move forward now, and you get to move forward in the way you choose. And we nullify our karma, right? Because, and the coming down to go up thing, this whole thing about the art, what the talk in the fall, it's like we have to come to a stable ground with our karmic entanglements in order to elevate into a transpersonal state. And that is this state of mid-age. That's what happens to us at mid-age. We get initiated into our wisdom if we choose. We don't have to. It's like a total free will universe here. We can stay inside the entanglement of our South Node. We can do that all we want.
Or I pulled the crone card yesterday. Yesterday I pulled cards for myself and I pulled crone. Also, TMI, my period just changed cycles from new moon, every new moon ever since I forever, to full moon now.
Interesting. Wow.
So it's like, oh, yes, hi. I have a friend who's my age, who's a grandmother. I'm like, oh, yeah. This is us now.
Wow. Wow.
So that opposition is, yeah, baby no more. Like the other side of the other side of the mountain.
Yep. Yep. The other side of the, well, I don't know about that. I'm not sure if it's yet the other side of the mountain. I think you're peaking. I think you're almost to the top of the mountain. I think you're making this choice. It's like when you go on that big hike and you're like 3/4 of the way up and you're like, I could just totally give up now because my thighs are killing me and I'm exhausted. And what's the point? And you don't want to go the rest of the way. Like this is that point, I think. I don't think we're peaking. I don't think we're coming down the other side of the mountain yet, Sarah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's coming. I, it's a
It
nice
will
thought though,
come,
but
it will
I
come.
don't think that I'm at that place. I think, I mean, I think maybe 60s, right? I think we need the second Saturn return. I think there's a lot more to come.
Right.
But anyway, let's get back to what this might mean for the collective. Okay, so let's make this relevant for all of us. If we have a south node of Libra and a north node of Aries, what are the lessons we might be facing from July of 2023 all the way to the end of 2024? What will happen in the collective during this time? What is going to be the so south node dis-ease, right? The karmic bind or the struggle or the shadow, and what is the resolution that Aries is inviting us into?
You see, I'm having that trouble again because I've worked so hard on my North Node being in Libra. I have also personal planets in Aries. You know, it's like I've done so much work to get out of my Aries self in a way and to bring it up to a Libra.
Well, then you will have a lot to teach us about Aries, right? You're going to
But
have a lot.
it's been difficult, but I think so if we think on a very plain level, so personal level, autonomy versus codependence. And so the idea of codependence is interesting. It means that I need you to be happy so I can be happy. I need you to need me. I need you to love me.
Yeah.
Is this idea is the I
need you to be me. I need you to be me. You and me, we won. If you do something I don't like, I'm gonna be different. So I need to control you, or
that's
I need to hold you, or I need to need you. It's like a need. It's like need. There was this really, I was on a plane and I was watching this Amsterdam movie. It was like, it's hilarious, man. This movie, Amsterdam movie, it just came out this past year. It has like Christian Bale in it, Taylor Swift, Margot Robbie, John David
Bale is the son-in-law of Gloria Steinem. Do you know that?
Cool. Well, I'm not surprised watching this movie. One of the most amazing quotes, and I wrote it down from this movie, I think encapsulates this transit. Let me just find it. Okay. So, this is the quote exactly. Okay. True love is based on choice, not need. Do you choose your love or do you need them? Choice matters over need. That's from the Amsterdam movie. Right. And when I watched that, I was like, you know what? That is probably the most genius sentence, especially for being part of the Pluto and Libra generation. You and I are part of the Pluto and Libra generation. So we're like intrinsically bound inside the structure of our reality is this Libra quality of needing, right? And yet we are all ultimately, you, me, all of the Pluto and Libras are trying so desperately to organize ourselves around reality, freedom, me, choice, sovereignty. Who am I? Who am I without the need, right? Like it's a very complicated thing in our generation, specifically. And so I think that really struck me as a very important thing. And I feel like it's indicative also of what the collective is going to be going through at one level, but there's more than just love involved here. It's more
I
than just
haven't thought about
intimate
this. Wait a
relationship.
second. The thought that I have about this also is, in relationship, how we think you made me angry. That
Yes.
your actions,
Yeah.
whatever the fuck you did, made me
Yeah.
angry,
Exactly.
right? And
Yeah.
so this idea of blame, right, is in the Libra Aries axis. That
Totally.
nothing you do can make me anything is Aries high road.
And yet that does not always that there is there is a shadow in that. Okay, because there is a shadow. I swear I haven't quite articulated it yet for myself. I'm working
Try,
on that.
try me.
There
Go, go,
is,
go.
okay, there is a responsibility that we all have in relationship. Okay, we all have a responsibility to do no harm, and we all have a responsibility to take care of our own reality, and our own reality needs to be free of harm and free of toxicity and free of all of that stuff,
Protection.
projection, blah 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 blah, blame, all that stuff. So there is a complicated thing in relationship where, yeah, if someone's being a motherfucker to you and abusing the shit out of you, and then you just say, you can't, sticks and stones will break my bones, but words can never hurt me. That's just not okay. Like, there's just like, there has to be some level of reality. Like
All this,
it's
so
complicated.
yeah, boundaries. It's also
Boundaries,
a word that
yeah.
has been like dragged, this word boundaries, like overused much, like very, very fucking much. Boundaries, my boundaries. And people are like mistaking boundaries for rules. They're mistaking, like, this word has been used a lot in a way that's like, ugh. But it is that Aries, Libra, boundaries.
Like, I
Where,
have a right to my freedom. I have a right to my
yeah,
sovereign self. You can't penetrate me with your reality and force it upon me. Yet you must take responsibility for your reality so that I can be free to have my own. And then we negotiate. And I think, like, it, but there is no way that we can detach these archetypes. Like, they cannot separate, which is why I don't understand that us-fucus conversation that everybody gets into, because I really don't understand reality outside of the pattern that is created within the tension of these opposing archetypal forces. Like, they speak to me as whole units, not as separate. So within the Aries, there must be the Libra. Within the Libra, there must be the Aries.
absolutely.
As we get rid of the toxic Libra, right? The toxicity of the need and the shame and the blame and the control and the subtle manipulation and the what is it called when you are not being direct but you're being subtle, right? What's it called? Passive
Aggressive.
aggressive. I hate that about Libra. And it's so polite, right? And it so justifies itself based on its own politeness and its
Nice.
own niceness, right? When we fix that toxicity and we allow ourselves to break free of it and to say no and to be ourselves, to be mighty, to be brave, to be powerful, to be real, to be forceful, to be fierce, then we can re-enter the Libra dynamic and we can negotiate. Then I can hear you and you can hear me and we're separate. And then we can get somewhere, right? Because we all need each other. We really do. We need each other. We are one. There is no separate anything. It's
Yeah.
an illusion. Yet I have a right to my separation, as do
Opportunity.
you have a right to yours. And then we also have a right to admit that we're interdependent. There's
Yeah.
just a healthy way to
Because
have
we cannot
relationships.
do anything by ourselves. There's no solitude is definitely not the answer.
It's not the answer. It's so
No.
lonely. I'm telling you, I know how lonely solitude is as a 12th house sun. It's desperately, intimidatingly, heartbreakingly real when we're alone. And I see that a lot when I walk around the city, living in a huge city, a big metropolis, right? I see the aloneness of so many of us, how we're so sheltered from and isolated from a sense of real, authentic connection and belonging. And, you know, so
Yeah. You know what's interesting also is that if we think about like the node, the north node going backwards, um, and so we're going to go from Aries to Pisces.
yeah, we're going to go into North Node of Pisces, right? Where we're all
So
becoming one again.
exactly. And so
Transformation
how is individuation in Aries actually the path to
toward oneness and
towards
wholeness.
oneness,
Yeah,
right? And
transcendence.
exactly.
And it's
How is
interesting
that?
as well. You make a really good point, because when we were talking about these meta cycles and people getting close, right? They're getting close. They need to individuate. We need to individuate in order to come into wholeness,
Mhm.
right? In order to come into wholeness. And as Neptune moves from Pisces into Aries, the nodes will be shifting from Aries into Pisces. I believe that's happening at the same time. 2025,
2025.
right? It's
2025
2025.
is crazy. And Uranus into Gemini.
And
It's
Uranus and Gemini. Yeah.
we're going into like a whole new chapter, which is really interesting because there's like literally some really big pages are turning collectively.
Mhm.
It's so interesting that we cannot see it from within.
No, we can't see it from within. We're just like, oh,
You know, we're like,
so in the
um,
silo of it. You have
but
to go way
how
out into the
is
Uranian field.
we're so used to seeing the zodiac going from Pisces into Aries that this is also an interesting thing to think as Aries as the last.
Yeah, well, that's the esoteric way of looking at the chart. And
Exactly.
yeah, that it goes down, like it goes from Pisces all the way down.
Exactly. So we're also at the last step
Right.
by going into Aries of
Yeah.
something. We're also into the last of the young signs,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
And so
that's
now
right.
we're going back into the older signs that whatever.
Yeah.
But so the last of the young, and so I'm thinking like high road of Aries is enthusiastic, is hopeful in a way. There is like a sense of possibility with
Yeah.
Aries that there isn't
Excited.
with the other signs.
Yes.
There's a
True.
sense of
Adventure.
yeah
There's a
of
willingness. So I always feel like Aries is will. There's a willingness in Aries. It doesn't know anything. It's
it's a
willing though. It's
possibility.
willing to meet it. It's willing to face it. It's willing to go there.
There to just do it
Jumped
with
off the cliff.
without doubt, you
Yeah.
know. The low road, of course, you know, is violence, and you know, I'm sure we're going to see some of that for sure. And I mean, humanity never fails to disappoint
I,
on the
I
level
think
of violence.
I think that we're going to have to see a force that is compensatory or composite to the amount of kind of complicit political correctness that we have entrenched ourselves into. So as the for the degree that we can't get out of Libran shadow, we will need to see an equal but opposite force from the Aries North node, from the Aryan warrior that says no. Like Aries needs to be a very strong no. And that no could come in a forceful way, absolutely, but it will be a force that is necessary to get us out of the delusion. I feel like Libra can be so delusional inside of its own man-made reality of what's right and what's wrong and what's good and what's bad, because they're so tuned in to vibration and to feelings. And they want so much a sense of stasis. They want so much a sense of harmony. They only want it to feel good, right? If it doesn't feel good, it's bad. And so they get very, 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 very narrow in their
Yeah,
parameter around what is acceptable, right? And what is fair and what is good and what feels right
you
versus
know,
lost in that.
this has come up a lot in readings recently, where I see people having the choice between freedom and acceptance, and choosing acceptance over freedom.
They're scared.
And because they're scared. And so this is like a pattern, and it's a choice that a lot of us have actually. You're going to your family dinner. Your mom says, blah, blah, blah. Are you going to say no? And people have an easier time saying no to their mom, actually, I feel, than they do, for instance, their friend or, you know, their community. Like, oh, that feels really scary because you know your mom is going to love you, even if you're
That's true.
and
You
you
can
don't want
practice saying no on your
to.
mom.
She's gonna love you, but your friends. So if your friends say something, you have the choice of saying no. That's not true. I don't agree. I
Yeah.
think that's such and such, but you might be withdrawn the love, which is very the
Oh,
passive
totally.
aggressive
Love
bullshit of leaving.
withdrawal. That's it. That's the passive
And
aggressive.
I will withdraw my love from
Uh-huh.
you if you don't behave exactly how.
Exactly how I want you to behave, which makes me feel comfortable because then I am feeling harmonious or whatever, balanced, whatever.
Exactly. The fake harmony where everybody is complicit.
Everybody is complicit in it. And so we were saying earlier that the whole like I'm watching the chinks in the armor of the woke ideology that started in the North Node of Gemini, where like there was a need in our culture for us to stand up and say no. We can be whatever we like, we can identify as ourselves, and there's all this stuff, and like no, it came from the right place, right? And yet it's becoming too dictate to, like it's becoming too controlling, it's becoming too right, like there's like an iron
You know what I
fist.
tell you? I feel like woke is also like it's also a word that's been bastardized and dragged into the mud,
Yeah.
right? Because it's been co-opted, and it's been co-opted by people who are exactly not that,
Yes.
actually.
Yes, that's
Who,
true.
right, who need everybody to believe the same thing, which is the exact opposite of what woke
Was originally intended
was
to be.
originally
Exactly. Yeah.
meaning to be.
Originally intended to be
Speak up.
liberation from
Exactly.
kind
You
of
are
oppression and an
from
ability
the
to be
human
ourselves.
mind,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so then we took that word and associated to the uni mind, which is exactly what it's not.
Social control. Social control.
Social
It's not
control.
what it is at all. So it's interesting. It'll be interesting to watch the migration of that in the culture and how that shifts and how that changes through this nodal axis
Yeah.
conversation that we're about to have. I wonder if there will just be this recognition that, you know, ideology in and of itself is almost is an unnecessary structure to some extent, right? If we are being authentically ourselves, it shouldn't matter whether we have a label or whether other people even recognize it. There's just this certain level of sovereignty or this certain level of authenticity that we need to ignite inside our own soul. No one else can give us permission for that. It's our own brave ability to be who we are no matter what, and not need anybody to give us permission, not need anybody's approval. We don't need to follow anyone's rules but our own, as long as we're doing no harm, right? There, as long as we're not hurting anybody.
It's the UN, you know, the UN has the sentence that goes, someone's freedom ends where another person's freedom begins.
Yes, exactly, exactly.
It's
And
like, yeah,
that's the boundary that you were talking about.
until your freedom becomes harm for someone else.
Exactly.
So
And we
it's
need to all take lesson there, because look at what we're doing. Look at how our freedom is harming so many things that we don't even consider important on the planet. Animals, nature, third world country, children, make manufacturing our bullshit. Like there's just so many ways that we are harming. Oh God, I don't even want to have that conversation because I'm going to start to vomit. Honestly, the second I start to
that's going to be our Pisces conversation. That's going to be our Pisces conversation.
yeah, you're right.
And
You're
there's
right.
going to be like a real moment of reckoning of the impact. And you know, it with Pisces, you know, people idealize, oh, Pisces, maybe that's going to be so. When
No,
Pisces shows you how deep the effect.
Pisces is the sign that rules compassion, because the actual compassion means you can feel everything.
Exactly.
And compassion is only possible when you let yourself feel everything.
and see everything.
And see everything.
And
like
so I
stomach it.
think that
Oh.
individuation is cute. And then, yeah, and then
And we go to the next level.
be like,
Oh my God. You are so wonderful. Talking to you is so much fun. This
the best.
was the hottest chat. I couldn't have even imagined how much fun this was. So
hour plus.
yeah, I think we're gonna wrap the hot chat. Sarah, Lhrar, and Sara Elise together in a hot chat, and we're gonna wrap this and we're gonna post this. We're gonna do something with this. But anyway, I'm gonna stop recording. And it was such a joy to hang out.
Stop recording.